All right, let's dive into this football game because we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We're going to hear from Kalani in just a moment. Cougars beat the Utes 22-21. Even as we did the postgame show, I couldn't believe they won that game. I'm staring at the stats. We're talking about them, but it was such an out-of-sorts game for the offense, in sorts for the defense in the second half. And then it comes down to a field goal, and BYU beats Utah for the second straight time, and they win in Salt Lake for the first time since 2006. And you know what? It was awesome.
It was awesome.
It just changed. Yeah. I woke up Sunday morning on a few hours of sleep, and I'm going, you know what? What just happened? And that's just awesome. It was just great.
And the defense were heroes again in this game. In the second half, they pitched a shutout. Utah did not score a point in the second half. Not only did they not score a point, Utah enjoyed great field position that entire second half. They got the ball right near midfield multiple times, and BYU didn't even let them get into field goal range to even have an attempt on a field goal. The defense was lights out in that second half, and which is a good thing because they played one of the worst games they've played in terms of assignments in the first half of that game. Now in hindsight that I've watched the film, Utah's offense is not good enough to have scored any points on BYU. No. If they do what they're supposed to do. And
we kept giving them free yards.
The emotion of that game, it is something. It's real. And we thought maybe it wouldn't be as big this year because they haven't played. Oh, boy. It had an impact. BYU, who's been one of the most assignment-sound defenses in the country week after week. Guys line up in the right spots. They're in the right gaps. They're doing their assignment. In that first half, you had guys lining up on the wrong side of the ball. You had guys on the wrong side of the defense. You had guys put in their exact right position by alignment and assignment to have interceptions that didn't execute their assignment. And in the first half, fortunately, they didn't give up too many big plays. But people have asked me, what amazing adjustments did Jay make at halftime? He made none. Utah didn't do anything that BYU didn't practice that week before. Everything that they had success with, BYU practiced over and over and over again. And so they just told the guys at halftime, listen, you have to calm down. You have to play within yourself. You got to get back to the way you've played all year long.
Get in your spot.
Get where you're supposed to be. Do your 111th. This has been one of the most consistent assignment-sound football teams in America. We don't know what that was in the first half. We don't need to change anything. Go out and play the way you know how to play. And guess what they did?
They went out and did it.
They went out and did it.
Shut them out.
They were right where they were supposed to be in the second half. They didn't make those errors, and they shut them down.
And Utah's defense was still just as good in the second half.
Yeah,
and Utah, they were tough. That's what they do.
We got to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
That's the best defense BYU's faced all year, and it's the best defense BYU will face all year. Well, I don't know who they play in the college football playoff.
Yeah, we'll see.
But and Utah's defense, let's give them some credit. They were very good. Their blitz packages were good. They were physical. But, you know, the BYU's defense was equally as good in that second half.
After the game, then that became a whole nother thing. Utah's athletic director, Mark Harlan, not only was he on the field and got a penalty flag thrown on him for yelling at the refs after
in the middle of a play,
in the middle of that kickoff. So he goes to the media room and sits down. Everyone's rolling, and then he proceeds to trash the officiating, especially on that holding call on 4th and 10 with 1:35 to go. BYU got a first down, and it allowed them to continue to drive down the field and kick the winning field goal. Harlan said, quote, "This game was absolutely stolen from us. We won this game. Someone else stole it from us." He was fined $40,000 by the Big 12 and reprimanded. He issued a vague statement on Sunday. We won't call it really an apology. The word sorry usually has to show up.
It didn't show up
in one of those.
Or the word apologize.
What a bad luck for the two schools which had just launched the Rivalry campaign, and then the athletic director takes a hard left. I wrote about it in the Deseret News today. You can see that at Deseret.com. But we were stunned. We were live on our postgame show when we saw the comments, and we're like, what gives?
We're going, what is going on?
A 20-year-old might say something like that.
I've been involved in college athletics for 40-plus years. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was crazy, and he just, lost his sense of what was right and what was wrong there for a bit. And I've never seen an athletic director go into the press conference and sit down and take questions or make a statement. That coach comes in and players come in. Have you ever seen an athletic director just show up and sit down at the press conference to make a proclamation like that? It was
he needed time. He needed a timeout.
The whole thing was unprecedented, and the bad part about it was, like, most coaches are smart enough to not, they'll go into press conference and say, well, I don't know about that call. I have to look at it on film, because until you look at, like, he was there on the sideline. And he just put all of his, I'm all in on this was a terrible call. And now that call's been reviewed over and over again by experts, they're like, yeah, absolutely was a holding call.
Yeah.
Absolute holding call. And Terry McCauley, who's an official that's NBC's rules analyst and also does work with Amazon Television on rules, 20-year NFL official, has officiated 3 Super Bowls. Now he's retired from doing that, but he's a rules analyst. He officiated college football for years. He came out and said that was an obvious foul, not even close. And then some other people, they just kept pushing the issue out on Twitter. And then Joel Klatt came out and said, oh, but it just wasn't consistent with the way they called it the rest of the game. So Terry said, really? So he went and got the All-22, which he has access to because of his job, and reviewed every pass play in the game and said there was not another holding call even close that should have been called in that game. So the refs were consistent. They called the bad holding foul. They didn't call other plays because there wasn't, and kind of corrected everybody. And yet Utah's still going all crazy on this thing. So
yeah, but you know who's not going crazy? Everyone that's got that video on their phone, they're like, yeah, okay,
that was holding
let's
it.
talk about something else.
Kudos to Terry McCauley for kind of stepping up and going, what's all the fuss about? This
a hold's a hold.
Yeah, and so who are we going to trust? I trust Terry McCauley on this one with his analysis.
So Val Hale was the athletic director at BYU years ago, and he's on the show coming up. And you know what? He's not at BYU anymore, so we can say what he wants.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of questions for him.
I'm anxious to hear what he thought of that.
Yeah, because he's been in that rivalry, and he's been in moments where BYU got jobbed by officials, and there's things you do and there's things you don't do.
And here's the other thing. Like, you remember when the face mask happened that wasn't a face mask on BYU, and that clearly showed that it wasn't a face mask. And we were all saying, we were there with Dave Nixon and Brian Logan and all these guys and Austin Collie, and we're all going, well, that's the call's the call. But BYU, you let them go down and score a touchdown after that. Why didn't you hold them to a field goal? You failed BYU defense. The worst thing that should have happened would have been a field goal. Nobody at Utah is saying, oh, but BYU did get the ball with a 1:30 left on, and had to drive 60 yards with no timeouts to kick a field goal. That's where Utah failed.
Yeah.
That's where they failed. They had every opportunity to stop that last drive. The game didn't end on the holding call.
The game was absolutely stolen from us. So you know what I wrote about in the paper? Yeah. I said, to play off Harlan stolen the thing is, when you shoplift. If you shoplift at noon or you shoplift 5 minutes before the store closes, it's still shoplifting.
Right.
Yeah, there's a penalty for that.
Yeah.
You know what? If you get away with it, more power to you. If you get caught, you go to jail.
Well, and Terry McCauley's point on his thing was, it's an obvious foul. It's always a foul. Doesn't matter whether it's the last 2 minutes of the game. Doesn't matter whether it's the beginning of the game. Yeah. It's a foul. And Trevor Maddich came out today, ESPN's analyst, former BYU guy that came on Sports Nation, and he said the other thing is that the receiver that was held was the primary receiver on the route, and Utah was in a defense without help over the top. If the DB doesn't grab him, it's probably a touchdown pass.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good penalty by the DB. And then it was on the defense to step up and get a stop. And they didn't.
So Val's up here in just a few minutes. Hang with us. A couple of stream updates. Timothy in from Perth, Australia.
There we go.
Kevin,
Australia's in the house.
Gilbert, Arizona. Neil from Tucson, Arizona. Expect both of you at the ball game in the 23rd. Tony from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska on the stream tonight. So let's talk about what we liked real quick, because there were a lot of things. Number one on the list, we liked Will Ferrin's field goals. 23, 33, and 44.
Yeah. All the special teams was very good again, but Big Game Bell, he came through just like he always does. That's his new nickname. Yeah. That's what, and he didn't name it himself.
Well, Jake told us on the postgame.
Retzlaff called him Big Game Bill. I like it. I'm sticking with Big Game Bill from now on for Will Ferrin.
Let's do that. We also like the second half defense. 79 total yards allowed to the Utes and no points.
Yeah, even with great field position, they were phenomenal in the second half. And we love that Retzlaff engineered that final drive. Started on their own 9, finished with a 44-yard field goal. They didn't panic. They really did a good job, and receivers made great plays. What about Chase Roberts' catch?
Oh, yeah. That catch was better than the one-hander against Arkansas because of what was riding.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had a clean shot with the one hand, which was phenomenal. This one he had, I still don't know how he caught it.
I don't know how he caught it.
But he caught it, and they reviewed it, and he still caught it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, here's what we didn't like, and this will resonate on the stream as well. We didn't like the fact that BYU was so sluggish in getting plays in, and the substitution patterns, which cost them timeouts and delays because of how the rule allows if you sub, they get a sub, and they get a sub at whatever speed they want to, it seems.
Right.
And that was frustrating, especially in the first half, but most of the game.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the postgame show. I hate the rule. I think the rule's got to be changed, and Utah has taken more advantage of it than anybody in college football. When you sub, what they do is they leave their defensive lineman that they're going to sub for on the field. He turns his back to the sideline. They jog somebody as slow as he can possibly jog off the sideline all the way in, tap him on the shoulder.
Yeah, we watched it. Drove us nuts.
Then he jogs off. And there's no timing rule in place. So if you sub with 24 seconds left, they literally can run out of 24-second clock and have to take a timeout. Here's the problem. It's the rule. It's not Utah's problem. That's brilliant of Utah to do that. I'm not getting on Utah. I think they're smart for doing it. The rule has to change, but you know that's the rule. So you can't substitute.
Yeah, adjust.
You got to. You know they're going to do that, so there's no excuse for not accounting for that.
So that bugged
and you know
everybody.
what you don't do out there? You don't substitute in the 2-minute offense, especially with that rule.
No.
And so you just keep whatever person you get the personnel you're best at, and you have a 2-minute offense designed around that personnel, and you just leave them in.
801 West Valley can see my notes from here on the stream. It says clock management. Didn't like clock management, especially at the end of the first half. It's just like, has anyone done this before? It was really strange. And even the announcers on ESPN were like, hey, doesn't anyone know?
Yeah, we were like, clock it. And then guys were changing sides of the
didn't.
field instead of clocking it. They also had a substitution during that 2-minute, which cost them some time.
Yeah.
And they were, they have to do a better job. And I know Kalani was upset about it. And I know that probably will not happen again.
You know what else we didn't like?
Practice a little more on that.
We didn't like that poor pass protection by the running backs. And I watched it again today. They just got mowed down. It didn't matter if it was LJ or Rapati. They were going backwards the whole time. And I don't think Jake ever got settled one time.
Yeah, and
that's got to get better.
Yeah, they've got to do a better job where they're going to have to play Moa or somebody that'll step up and take people on in pass situations. So the other thing that we didn't like the lack of execution on the defense in the first half.
No.
But what we loved was for them to turn it around, get their minds right, and execute almost perfectly in the second half. So there was a lot to like. I'll tell you what I do like. This team is good enough and plays together enough where they don't point fingers and they don't go off the rails, that playing maybe the worst half of football they've played all year, they still came back and beat the rival.
Yeah.
Great teams
like that.
figure out a way to do that. So that's my favorite thing about the whole game.
So on last week's show, you announced your keys to beating Utah. And we're going to follow up because that's what we do on this show. We say stuff, and then we follow up on it. Your number one key to beating the Utes was win the turnover battle. Check. BYU had
+2.
forced to and didn't turn it over at all. And they kind of got a fumble at the end. So in theory, there was a fumble recovery on that kickoff.
+3.
So +3. Yeah. Shut down Utah's run game. What are you doing on that?
Yeah, I think they did overall, because that's what Utah was relying on. They held them to 152 yards, 4.9 yards a carry. I'd like to see them do a little bit better. I'm giving them a what do we call that? Just an even.
A dash?
A dash. I'm not giving them a plus.
Your third key, a quick passing game, used the short passes to set up the run. I don't know if they set up anything. It just was a weird flow.
And Utah had the ball a lot in that first half. They could do a better job. They did hit Chase Roberts on a couple, and they hit a couple quick outs to Darius Laster. I'm giving him a dash again because they did it a little, but I think they could have neutralized Utah's blitz a lot better by getting the ball out quicker. And part of the problem was he kept getting balls batted down on quick throws, and part of that is protection. When you're going to quick throw, if your running back's in the protection, he's got to go up and meet the guy at the line of scrimmage. So I'm giving him 2 dashes and a plus. But you know what? The reason win the turnover battle is always number one is because it overrides a lot of stuff.
Yes, it does.
And being +2 in meaningful time and being +3 overall, that makes a difference in every game.
Chris Bosman's key, she's the Utah alumni director, was on the show last week. So they were talking about the food drive, and they're busy kind of getting the final numbers to what they raised, and we'll have an update for you next week. But Chris gave her key. The key for Utah was red zone conversions into
Right.
touchdowns. They went 3 for 3. They just didn't get any in the second half.
Yeah,
So
both teams were 3 for 3.
we'll give her a check on that. And then Michael Johansson, the BYU alumni director, said, consistency, know your role, play your 111th. What did you think?
First half, definitely not. Second half, great job. So what do you do?
Would you give him a half check?
We give him a check in the second half and a minus in the first
Second half check. That's better than a first half check and a second half minus. Thank you for watching The Wise Guy.
If you like what you're watching, you can help us out by subscribing and hitting that notification button.